The top 5 quarterbacks in the 2025 NFL Draft. Alex, I feel like we've done this for the past 2 or 3 years because it's always been one of the Giants' needs, and they haven't addressed it. But this year, hopefully, they will actually address it. Now, the first 2 quarterbacks in this year's draft class are way above the rest. They're in a tier by themselves. They're the tier 1 guys. And past that point, it's going to be a wide gap, a wide margin until you get to the other half and the other tier. This tier is kind of an open-ended tier. I don't even know if there's a tier 2 and a tier 3. I feel like they're just combined. But we're going to get to all of that, and I'm not going to waste any time to get to number 5. And that is a guy that from our I don't want to say preseason, our midseason rankings, the earliest we've ever done draft prep before was in mid-November. And we put this guy at number 3, and his name's Jalen Milroe from Alabama. And you can say, people might not agree, but between us, Alex and I, the fall-off of Jalen Milroe needs to be studied. That's what you have to say, because this was a player that we thought was number 3, and he was in that category with the tier 1 guys we'll get to a little bit later. But now, the TD to interception ratio is not great. The amount of touchdowns thrown is not great. The mobility in the pocket is something that we were really excited about again with Alabama, and then they just fell off, kind of like the team, honestly. And they just weren't able to make it to the CFP playoffs, even with the expanded playoffs. So Jalen Milroe, 22 years old, 225 pounds, 6'2", 2,800 passing yards, which is lower than like every other guy on this list. 16 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, only five numbers separating the touchdown to interception ratio. And when you're throwing double-digit picks and when you're not throwing more than 20 touchdowns, it doesn't look good on any stat sheet for a quarterback. And that's just kind of what we've seen from Milroe. But to be a little positive about him, I will talk about that because he's able to escape. He has that athleticism. I mentioned it already, but he is a very good, scrambling quarterback, and he's that mobile guy that you're going to see in the NFL, similar to players like Josh Allen, who we saw a lot this season take off, and prior years, especially Lamar Jackson. That's one of his big comparisons with just how athletic Jalen Milroe is. He's also got a good arm, and he's able to hit players really outside the numbers, not just over the middle of the field. But the accuracy is the problem, and that's where you get those double-digit interception marks. The 11 interceptions have come from poor accuracy. And again, someone both Alex and I were really high on. I know one of us was higher on him than the other person. Was that you or was that me? I don't know. I'm not pinning blame.
I think it was me, and I'll say this. Watching like Senior Bowl stuff, it was unacceptable levels of inaccuracy. And he just looked awful. And towards the latter half of the season, he looked awful. And I think that really changed my perspective. I'm not saying he looked amazing before that. I'd say he had his ups and he definitely had his downs, but it was just all downs post November, I think is pretty fair to say. So yeah, I think someone's still going to take a shot on him day 2, but his athleticism there, his escapability is always going to be there. But is he going to be able to be accurate? Is he going to throw the ball into the dirt half the time, or is he going to be able to hit the man he's targeting? And I think that's going to be the main concern with Jalen Milroe, and that's why he's fallen so many places. Of course, one guy we're going to talk about in a couple minutes two guys actually have flown up draft boards, so that's also part of it. And I'm kind of teeing Josh up because it's his guy next on the list, and I'll give him his time to shine and talk about him. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Milroe.
Yeah, just before we transition, Jalen Milroe, he's got that Alabama program. It's always going to be there. He's always going to say, I'm an alum of Alabama, of the Crimson Tide, and that'll always get you above other guys who are from other schools. You're either going to draft a guy from Alabama or a guy from North Dakota State. You're going to draft a guy from Alabama. You're going to draft a guy who played for the Crimson Tide or played for the Syracuse Orange. You're probably going to draft the guy from the Crimson Tide. But in this list and this past season, a guy that played better than Jalen Milroe is Kyle McCord, the 22-year-old player, 224 pounds, 6'3", who stands elegantly in the pocket, who soared up draft boards this season, as you said, Alex, and set records, I tell you, in just a single season for the Syracuse Orange, won games for our team, put us in a conversation that we could have made it to the college football playoff if we got wins over stupid teams like Stanford and BC. Boy, do I want those games back. But Kyle McCord put the guy we're going to talk about a little bit later in Cam Ward, I'm not going to tell you where yet, out of the CFB playoffs. He did that. He carried the team on his back. Now, defense played pretty well in that game, but that was really Kyle McCord. Over 4,700 passing yards, 34 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Again, you can have 12 interceptions when you have over 30 touchdowns, and that's what he had. He's got a quick release. He's really accurate in his throws, not only in the short game, but in the deep game as well. But there is a con that Jalen Milroe has a pro about, and that is his athleticism. Now, he's a bigger guy. He's not going to move around a lot. Now, we did see some athleticism where he was scrambling out of the pocket. There was a touchdown this season where he hopped over the pylon, did a little flip. So, like, he does show flashes of it, but there's not really that much to work with, I will say. I'm trying to find his exact stat line from this Miami game. And then he also just forces throws. We saw that in his worst performance of the entire season. Another loss we should have had back, Pitt. Kyle McCord threw, I believe it was 5 interceptions and 3 pick sixes in that game against Pittsburgh. It was atrocious. It was crazy, and it was something Syracuse fans and everyone alike around the nation was not obviously expecting. And that was just his one throwaway game of the season, literally and figuratively, because he threw the ball away so many times in that contest. However, he was able to bounce back for the rest of the year and really finish the season well. Alex, do you have anything on Kyle McCord while I find his game stats against Miami?
I'll say this. Obviously, I think, Josh, no offense, but some people may be sitting here looking at you and seeing your Syracuse banner in the background. They're like, maybe this guy's a little bit biased. But I
am biased. I completely agree. I am a little bit biased. But you know what's not biased is facts. And there's no
there you
bias.
Go. The facts are that he had an excellent statistical year.
You cannot defend that he went 26 for 36 with 380 yards and 3 touchdowns against one of the best teams in the nation and knock them out of the college football playoff. I will stand on that hill, literally, because Syracuse is on a hill. I'm going to stop talking now. Go ahead.
Oh my God. All right. Yeah, no, and you said, 34 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Almost half of those interceptions came in one game. And, everyone has their bad days, and that was certainly one of them for Kyle McCord. And I'm sure he still has nightmares about that game to this day. But yeah, I think he's a very confident, older school style quarterback, right? It's not often you see, I don't want to use the term statue because that's kind of offensive to use, but less mobile quarterbacks, guys who are really not going to be moving around a bunch. And that's not common in the NFL anymore. But Kyle McCord definitely fits that mold. And I think because of that, though, he's learned how to be comfortable in the pocket because he's realized his own limitations. He's been very accurate outside the numbers, which is something that a lot of guys on this list that we're talking about have not been in their college career. And if you're kind of looking for a guy who's a little bit more polished, a little bit more NFL ready almost, I think Kyle McCord would slot in very nicely on a team that has a nice foundation around them. Say a team like the 49ers or a team like the Rams, say if they did get rid of Matthew Stafford, that has that solid core. Now for the Giants, I'm not sure how great he'd be just because the Giants are not a team that is known for setting up their quarterbacks for success. And he doesn't have necessarily that it factor that he can kind of just run the game all completely on his own because his athleticism is just not there compared to a guy like a Jalen Milroe, a Shedeur Sanders, a Cam Ward, who can really move around a little bit and make plays with their legs as well. And I think that kind of limits Kyle McCord's ceiling. And I think that's why you're probably not going to see him go any higher than the late first round, which I'm still a little skeptical he's going to go that high, but I think day 2 is definitely where you'll see him, in my opinion.
Yeah, Alex, I agree with you. I do think we saw it in college. I don't know how well it'll translate to the NFL type of game where he can take it over just because of the athleticism of defensive players, defensive linemen, edge rushers, etc. Let's go to number 3. Jackson Dart, the 21-year-old, 225 pounds, 6'2", played for Ole Miss this past season. 4,200 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, a really nice stat line for Dart. And that's why we have him at number 3 here, a guy that I would have no problem with the Giants taking in the second round if they went for another option in the first round. They weren't able to get the top 2 quarterbacks. Possesses above average arm strength. We saw that this season for sure. He's got an understanding of when to throw, where to throw, and to use velocity and the right amount of touch on those balls. And then cons, slower mental processing, reading defenses post-snap. So obviously not able to, I guess, translate a good way of moving through the defensive progressions as an offensive player in as a quarterback, and then less than ideal anticipation when throwing from the pocket. So obviously things that he can work on, getting better of reading the defense. And also that's basically it. I think that less than ideal thrower in the pocket and then slower mental process when he reads defenses after the snap, those go hand in hand. And the thing is, that's college defenses. So it's going to be a whole different game in the NFL. And I think that's something that his quarterback coach and whatever that may be can develop once he reaches that level.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these cons, Josh, actually come from the way Ole Miss runs their offense. These cons feel oddly similar to a couple years back when we were talking about Matt Corral and him coming into the draft from Ole Miss. And it's because of the way that they play offense and how simple it is that it's kind of just laid all out there for the quarterback to kind of just make the assigned throws, you could say, and kind of just get out of there. So when he does occasionally have to read the defense and there's more longer developing progressions, it's tough because he just doesn't have the reps at that on those types of plays. So I think it's not necessarily something that's he's limited to as a player, but it's something that he's been limited to based on the system he's been playing. So I think that's something important to keep in mind and something we've always said about Ole Miss quarterbacks. So I think that's an important kind of side note along with the pros and cons. But Dart, I mean, people are talking about him in the top 5, in the top 10, obviously a major riser. And I don't know if I would take him there. I think you could take him at the end of the first round, maybe even the middle of the first round, but top 10 seems a little rich for me based on what I've seen out of him on his tape. And I think when you talk about the top 2 guys, he's still not quite there as the total package that those guys are in terms of being a prospect coming into the league. But I think Jackson Dart, I think he's going to be a good quarterback in the league. I don't know if has the potential, though, to be one of those really elite guys. And I think that's what you're looking for when you're picking in the top 5, top 10, the potential to have a MVP caliber quarterback. And I don't think Jackson Dart would ever reach that level. Doesn't mean he can't be a Pro Bowler or a very solid above average quarterback, but I think the ceiling is a little bit lower than some of the final 2 guys we're going to talk about here, Josh.
So everyone's wondering now, what's the order? Where do you have Cam Ward? Where do you have Shedeur Sanders? We have Shedeur Sanders at number 2 out of Colorado, the 23-year-old, 6'2", 215-pound quarterback, over 4,100 passing yards. That's a 74% completion percentage for Sanders. Very good. 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and I say very good to the completion percentage because that's part of his pros, plural. There's 2 of them that we have down. Accuracy is the first one. He connects on those balls that he throws. His receivers catch them. Now, will I say that Travis Hunter is one of the best, if not the best, wide receivers in this draft class, and that might have impacted his completion percentage? Absolutely. But he's still very accurate and hits most of his guys downfield, and that's really what you want to see out of an NFL quarterback. You don't want a quarterback that's inaccurate. That's plainly stated. He also avoids turnovers. He did reach double-digit interceptions this season with 10, but he's really good at holding on to the ball when there's nothing that he can find or throws out of bounds when that is the case, and he isn't able to find any open options. However, some cons. Not elite arm strength. His downfield ball is decent, not great, can be better. Played under one of the worst all lines in college football, so take this one with a grain of salt, but looks pretty bad with his pocket presence. Could look better, whether it's inside or outside of the numbers. But that is, again, something that might have to do with the O-line. So maybe you should come to the Giants because we have a great O-line for that. that can really make his pocket presence look even more atrocious. So I don't know. Maybe that'll help Shedeur Sanders with not coming to the Giants, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, we have Shedeur Sanders at number 2 here.
Yeah, addressing the pocket presence stuff first, I think it is majority to do with his O-line from the clips I've seen. And because his footwork is actually excellent in the pocket. I know that's something that a lot of people have talked about. His footwork is absolutely fantastic for a college player. So from that standpoint, you have a big positive. So if you can kind of get him a little bit more comfortable, a little less anxious in the pocket, I think he could be a lot better at the NFL level there. The accuracy is very impressive. 74% completion percentage is insane. He's probably one of the most accurate quarterbacks that has come out of college in recent years. And I think that is very valuable. Maybe it's definitely a floor raiser, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you have a higher ceiling, but when you're coming into the NFL with that kind of floor, I think that is very, very good. And it kind of cements you as a top 10 to 15 pick. And I think that's what happened with Shedeur Sanders. His arm strength, I would agree, is not elite, but I think he can make the throws still. I don't think it's a concern that he won't be able to launch the ball down the field, because we've seen him do it for Colorado and connect with Travis Hunter deep down the field or other receivers. So is it as great as, obviously everyone knows who number 1 is now, Cam Ward's deep ball? No. Is it as good as some of the other prospects we've seen in the past couple of years, deep balls? No. But he still has enough of an arm to get the ball down the field. I think that's the most important thing. And I'll say this before we talk about Cam Ward. I think it's very close between those two. Every time I watch them, both of them, I go back and forth. The only thing that I think keeps Cam Ward a little bit above Shedeur for me is the off the field stuff and what comes with being Deion Sanders' son in New York. And I know that's not necessarily something he can control, but the potential for catastrophe with a big personality like Shedeur Sanders in the New York market it's always going to be in the back of my mind. And for that reason, I don't think I can put him above Cam Ward, despite the better accuracy, despite the lack of turnovers, and despite the impressive statistics he's put up this year.
Alex, you mentioned Shedeur Sanders not having a better deep ball than Cam Ward. There's no quarterback in this draft class that has a better deep ball than Cam Ward. Cam Ward is making highlights. He's getting viral clips on social media because of how good his deep ball is, and that is his main asset. Of the quarterback from Miami, 22 years old, 6'2" and 223 pounds. As we said, our number 1 quarterback in the 2025 NFL draft class, Cam Ward. Over 4,300 yards, passing yards, 67% completion percentage, which is, by the way, not half bad either. 39 touchdowns and 7 interceptions in the single digits, 4 interceptions this year. Great in the pocket. Notice that nonchalant passer, right? He's just the guy, again, that was making viral clips. Like, people are like, Cam Ward just doesn't care. He just so effortlessly dodges tackles and defensive linemen and edge rushers coming into the pocket and trying to disrupt his passing. He just doesn't let it affect him. And then he'll drop a 60 bomb on you and throw it 65 yards down the field for a touchdown. And we saw that a lot this season. And he's just able to do that all the freaking time. And that's why he's number 1 here. The one con that we have down is his occasional lack of urgency, sort of where that nonchalantness bites him, right? Sometimes he can just be too laid back to where he's not really focusing on the score or how much time he has left on the play clock or the game clock, and not really understanding of situations. But again, I think that'll really come with NFL coaching, and it shouldn't be a problem in the next level.
Yeah, I think the simplest way to put it is Cam Ward, he has a lower floor than Shedeur Sanders, but the ceiling is non-existent because he can go up to the moon in terms of his arm talent, his potential, the it factor, which I know I always like to use, which you see a lot with Cam Ward. And I think he's going to be an excellent quarterback. Now, do I think there's a potential that he doesn't develop properly? And he needs a place that he's going to develop properly, right? Because he's very raw in a lot of areas. And I think the Giants might not be the ideal fit for that, of course. But despite that, I think you have to take a chance on him if he's there when you're picking, or even if you like him enough, trade up for him, because I think he is a special, special talent. And I'm not saying he's a guaranteed star, but I think it's worth the shot. And his highlights, his tape in college is not something that can just go over your head. And it is significantly more kind of jaw dropping than Shedeur Sanders at times. And I think that's what has kind of propelled him over him in these discussions. And I think that's why he's number one. And I'd be very happy and excited if Cam Ward was a New York Giant now. But I'd be worried that we screw this up, of course. But that's kind of, you can't draft scared, I think is the main thing that I've kind of learned over the past few years is if there's a guy out there that you think really has MVP potential, you got to go grab him. If it's a gold jacket player, of course, very different in the case of Saquon Barkley a few years back, but at the quarterback position, at least, you see a potential MVP, you got to go and do what you can to get him on your team. And I think that's the case with Cam Ward here.